Welcome back to this week's first episode of the greatest podcast on turf. If you are new here, I'm Anthony.
I'm Ryan.
And today we are back with our Week 2 Fantasy Football Stardom Sit-em. This is our first episode of the week. This is like our third episode of the week, actually. But yeah, with all that being said, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, rate us on Apple Podcasts, because I think 86% of our listeners are Apple Podcasts.
Nice.
So I guess Spotify is kind of just dead. Yeah, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new. Be sure to be on the lookout for our Week 2 NFL predictions and our Week 2 best bets of the season that we are dropping tomorrow and Friday. And again, don't forget to subscribe. And before we get into any stardom sit-em, Ryan's going to tell you guys about today's sponsor.
Little Italy Pizzeria, best cheesesteaks, best pizza in all of Delaware. 2 locations. One is in Middletown, Delaware. The other one is in Townsend. Great family business, great food, great people, great prices. Be sure to come in and check it out. Nothing new that the greatest podcast on turf sent you. They will take care of you. Show proof that you're subscribed and that you listen to us, and they will hook you up with an additional discount.
Yes, they will. We'll start with quarterbacks. Starting off with my starting quarterback this week, the guy is a guy who I'm very high on. A guy who a lot of people aren't very high on, like Ryan. His initials is DC, similar to one of the greatest UFC fighters of all time.
It's fair.
Derek Carr. Now you may ask, Anthony, why Derek Carr? He didn't look that good this week. It's Derek Carr, for Christ's sake. Let me tell you why. The fact of the matter is, Derek Carr is one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the NFL. He is on a very high-powered offense with a top 3 tight end in football, with a top 3 wide receiver in football. He's got a new head coach, and he's going up against a Cardinals defense that looked absolutely horrible last week.
That allowed 35 points at Patty Mahomes.
Yes. So the fact of the matter is, against a pretty good Chargers defense last week, Derek Carr still threw for just shy of 300 yards with 2 touchdowns, with the opening game with a terrible offensive line, and they almost won the game. The Cardinals defense is terrible. The Cardinals defense they have a bunch of random pieces that they're still trying to figure out how to use, and that's really it. I mean, the bright spots of that defense are Zaven Collins, Isaiah Simmons. I mean, didn't Byron Murphy get hurt last week?
I think he came back in, but he definitely was banged up for a little bit. J.J. Watt, I think, is probably still hurt.
Yeah, but Derek Carr is going to go do his thing this week. Derek Carr, even in a bad game, he's still good. I mean, we saw last week he had a bad game, and he still put up about 20 fantasy points. But then I'm sure he could do the same, if not more, against the Cardinals defense this week. They look very bad. Devontae Adams looked himself. Derek Carr is only going to get better as the season goes on, just like he does every year. We talked about this more on our best bets on Friday that's dropping. Friday that's dropping. So I'm starting Derek Carr this week. I don't have him in any leagues, unfortunately. But if you have Derek Carr, I wouldn't look too much into last week. I think he's going to be just fine this week. I think this is a perfect game for him to get his season MVP campaign started against the Cardinals defense this week.
My quarterback start this week, it is no other than Carson Wentz, the man himself.
I'm sorry? I'm sorry, what?
Carson Wentz. Last week, he went up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. He put up a modest 30 points in fantasy, finishing
our friends
as...
call a second take.
Yeah, that's fair. Finished higher than guys like Jalen Hurts, many other quarterbacks, Kyler Murray, Lamar, pretty much everybody except Josh Allen and Pat Mahomes. Carson Wentz was better than.
It's fair.
And I think could be more of the same this week. He's going up against a Lions defense that just allowed Jalen Hurts to do pretty good against them. Allowed 38 points to the Philadelphia Eagles. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not sure the Eagles offense is that much better than Washington's offense. I'm not sure it's better at all. Because I think the Eagles offense, it's better in the run game, sure. I'm not going to argue and be an asshole. But I think in terms of who can put up more points, I think Washington could probably put up more points than Philly, considering they got Terry, Curtis, Dotson against the Eagles just having A.J. Brown. I know they have Devontae Smith, but it's really just A.J. Brown. Personally, I think that it's going to be kind of a similar situation. I think Carson Wentz against the Lions can do kind of the same thing. Another guy that I told you to sit last week, but I probably think it's fine to start him this week. It's Matt Stafford. He looked like shit against the Bills. I'm not going to lie to you. If you're in like a single quarterback league and Kirk Cousins out there, I'd probably still rather have Kirk Cousins. But if you drafted Matt Stafford with the hopes that he'd be good, you could probably start him again this week against Atlanta. I think they bounce back.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, moving on to my sit-em quarterback of the week. I said sit this guy last week, and I'm saying it again. Tua Tagovailoa of the Miami Dolphins. I'm not sold on the Dolphins yet. I just think the Patriots kind of blow. It's unfortunate. But no, I'm not sold on Tua. I think you can confidently sit him again this week. I'm sure there's better QBs on the waiver wire that I'd rather start this week, such as a Carson Wentz-esque player, a Kirk Cousins-esque player going up against the Eagles, which is going to be all the makings for a shootout. So, yeah, sit Tua this week. I think this is a tough matchup. I think this is a tough matchup for both teams in this game, actually, Ravens and Dolphins. So I think that'll kind of be a defensive standoff type of deal. So I'm sitting Tua this week.
My sit quarterback of the week, it's Tom Brady against the Saints.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, I'd rather start Carson Wentz than Tom Brady this week.
I mean, I see the vision.
It's going to turn me into an asshole.
Yeah.
Going up against the Saints usually have his number for whatever reason.
I'm not sure why.
Don't know, have no clue. If you have to start Tom Brady, by all means, start Tom Brady.
It's still Tom Brady.
Exactly. He just didn't look that good last week because, I mean, they ran the ball a shit ton. I think they are probably going to do the same against the Saints. I think that might be their identity moving forward, to relieve some of the stress off Tom Brady, especially when Chris Godwin's out. I think if Lenny is having success on the ground, I think that they kind of translate back more into that. And against the Saints, they usually have his number. Tom Brady and the Bucs, I thought were going to start slow. I think that they still could start slow because the offensive line, in my opinion, still isn't the greatest. I just think that they focus more on the ground, and Tom Brady might not be one of the prime top echelon starts like he was last year. I think Tom Brady might be hovering around like the QB 10 range this year just because of how the offense moves. I'm not saying Tom Brady took a step back. I just think they are making him take a step back because they're not going to use him in the same way that they were.
No, that's fair, and I can see that. Moving on to our stardom running backs this week. These are two guys who normally you wouldn't hear. You don't really like to hear for stardoms, but I have both of these guys on the same team, and I'm starting them both confidently. And as first guy is Damien Harris at the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers took a significant blow on the defensive line to TJ Watt. Third, fourth, I don't remember what round pick. DeMarvin Leal is injured. He sounds like he's healthy. Cam Hayward's also a little banged up. The Bengals, they couldn't really run the ball much last week just because they were playing from behind the whole time, but when they did, they found success. And I think the Patriots are really going to revert back to just trying to ground and pound behind what little offensive line we have left against the Steelers. I think this is, like we talked about on our Best Bets episode dropping Friday, I think this game has all the means to just be a low-scoring game where two quarterbacks that are kind of just game managers go out and just game manage, a lot of running the ball, a lot of quick plays, not a lot of scoring in this game. And I think that makes Damien Harris to be a pretty solid, safe start this week against the Steelers defense that has been very inconsistent at times against the run. I think the Patriots are going to try and run the ball a lot and push the ball down their throat, especially with Mac Jones back, not being 100% and with all that going on. So I think you can start Damien Harris this week and have a pretty successful day against the Steelers this week.
My first starter running back this week, it's Daryl Henderson against the Falcons. Now, I do understand that the Falcons had a pretty good run defense last week against running backs, about 60 yards, give or take. But that's kind of overshadowed with Taysom Hill. He had 57 rushing yards, which isn't really counted into that. So they did allow a decent amount of rushing yards. And I know that Cam Akers is there, but I told you guys this a while ago. I've been preaching drafting Daryl Henderson in all your drafts because of the price that he was going. I have him in half of my leagues. And I'm going to start him this week against the Falcons. I'm going to start him so the wheels fall off. And I'm not sure that the wheels will fall off. He saw 80% of the snaps last week. He didn't do that good in fantasy purposes. Granted, he was going up against the Buffalo Bills, and they got absolutely destroyed. I think this is a different story. Back-to-back home games for the Rams, and now they're playing against the Falcons, and they're pissed off. So I'm starting Daryl Henderson this week, and which should be a positive game script for him.
No, I like that a lot. I mean, if you followed us all this offseason, which I'm sure a lot of you have, we've been preaching Cam Akers isn't him. Daryl Henderson's him. And it showed. Next up, my second stardom running back this week, Miles Sanders of the Philadelphia Eagles, going against the Minnesota Vikings Monday night. The Eagles made it a focal point of their offense to get all their running backs going, saying they're not afraid to run the ball. They're not afraid to throw their running backs, and that's good for Miles Sanders. He actually got in the end zone last week, which is a plus. He is still the primary RB1, going up against a Vikings team this week that kind of got ran all over by A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones. Now, is Miles Sanders as good as those guys? No. But do the Eagles have one of the best offensive lines in football? Maybe. I'm not going to say yes, because a lot of our friends will hold that against me. But the Eagles do have a very good offensive line. They looked very good last week against the Detroit defensive line, who also looked very good. And the Vikings, really, they just couldn't stop Aaron Jones or A.J. Dillon in the run game or the pass game. So I think Miles Sanders is going to be another focal part of this Eagles offensive game plan this week, going against the Vikings on Monday night. So go ahead and start Miles Sanders if you have him, because I know I am.
The second running back I'm starting, it's A.J. Dillon against the Bears. It's a little bit obvious, but I think you can start both A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones this week. I think they both have a bounce back. Well, Aaron Jones, I think, has a bounce back week. The Packers, they kind of look bad on offensive. I mean, that's kind of an understatement. Alan Lazard is back, so that might help him out a little bit. But other than that, they didn't really look too good. I think they bounce back against the Bears, and I think they do that on the ground. I think A.J. Dillon is in line for a lot of touches. I think Aaron Jones is in line for a lot of touches also. So I think you can start both Packers running backs this week in what should be a positive game script against the Bears. They're huge favorites. I believe they're like 10-point favorites, which arguably is too much. But you can start both Packers running backs, in my opinion.
Yeah, moving on to our sit-em running backs of the week. This guy, he didn't do good last week. He didn't do bad last week. He saw most of his production in the passing game, and that is Chase Edmonds of the Miami Dolphins going up against the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens' defense looked very, very, very good. Yes, I know it was against the Jets. I know it was Joe Flacco. They threw the ball 60 times, whatever. But I think it was perfect for a Jets defense or a Ravens defense that's coming off a lot of injuries. And like I said all last week, the Ravens had something to prove. They were kind of the forgotten team in the division. They came out and proved that they are still a force to be reckoned with. Chase Edmonds, he really I think he carried the ball 16 times, but only rushed for like 30, 40. He scored 10 total fantasy points. And he just he wasn't much of a difference maker in the Patriots-Dolphins game. And again, like I said earlier in the episode, I think that this game is going to be a defensive showdown. Two of the top defenses in football going at it. I mean, neither team, I don't know. You got to sit Chase Edmonds this week. I don't know why I'm getting so stuttery. But you're sitting Chase Edmonds this week. The Ravens defense is a force to be reckoned with. The Dolphins offensive line really is not all that good to come out here and run all over a defense as good as the Baltimore Ravens, who are notorious for blitzing or notorious for shutting down the run. Last year, they gave up the least amount of yards per game to teams who ran the ball, or teams that ran the ball against them. I think they only gave up 84 yards a game, which was lowest in the league. And that's going to carry over in the next game. They shut down Michael Carter and Breece Hall last week, and they're going to shut down Chase Edmonds all the same this week. So go ahead and sit Chase Edmonds this week.
First running back sit him this week. It's Cam Akers against the Falcons. I don't really have to explain myself much here. It's feeding off the Daryl Henderson news. Yep. Cam Akers is going to probably get benched. He was already benched. I don't know. It's Daryl Henderson's job. If Cam Akers does get back up to speed, it's going to be a 1A, 1B situation, and they're probably both going to be worthless, if we're being completely honest. But right now, it's Daryl Henderson's job, and I would not start Cam Akers until he showed me weeks of consistency.
Yeah, I agree.
I also didn't draft him, so
I didn't
it's on y'all.
But I agree. Yeah, that's what happens when you don't listen to us. You get stuck with a Cam Akers on your team. My next sit-em running back this week, Damien Pierce. I know this may not be saying much, but he found himself in a committee last week with Rex Burkhead. Rex Burkhead was the primary pass-catching back, and they kind of split carries in total. And they're going up against a Broncos team that kind of shut down Rashad Penny yesterday. I think Rashad Penny only had... the Seahawks won, but Rashad Penny didn't really do much. I think he finished with like 6-8 fantasy points.
He had like 6 yards of carry, but Pete Carroll hates that dude. I'm convinced. Yeah. He had 10 carries for 60 yards or something.
But yeah, if the Broncos come out here and do anything, I think the Broncos are going to put up a lot of points this week. They're playing pissed off. They lost to Seattle somehow on Monday night. And I don't really want parts of a Houston Texans running back committee at the current state of where the Houston Texans are. Now, maybe if the offensive line continues to play good like they did the other day and they continue to get better, maybe I want parts. But up against the Broncos defense, I don't want any parts of Damien Pierce this week or Rex Burkhead for the fact of the matter. But a lot of people I know have Damien Pierce, and I know as fantasy drafts came in as the preseason ended, Damien Pierce was going a lot higher. But I don't think at this point right now, week 2, he's going to be able to live up to where you drafted him at. So I'm sitting Damien Pierce this week.
I'll touch on the Damien Pierce thing a little bit, give my take. I'm not buying into that much week 1. I kind of think that Damien Pierce gets his ground back. I heard a couple of guys saying it, and I kind of agreed with them. They said that Damien Pierce, the Texans got a lead and they were scared to lose it, so they just gave the ball to the veteran. And I don't disagree. And then I saw reports that Lovey was saying that Damien Pierce is going to get the ball more, and he was planning on getting the ball more, and he just didn't because whatever reason. I could honestly see that reason being they were scared to lose the lead, because that is the Texans thing to do. And I think as the season progresses and they need to go young, they're going to start giving the ball to Damien Pierce more. So I think he could potentially be a buy low right now. Because he did shitty. I'm not going to lie to you. Depending on his price, if you could pick him up pretty cheap, I wouldn't blame you.
No.
But my next sit-em, Zeke Elliott against the Bengals. I think Zeke will be okay this year. He's not a high upside play. He's going to get the ball a shit ton of times. They're going to feed that man until he is into the ground.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure he's going to get a touchdown. If he gets a touchdown, he has a good fantasy day. If he doesn't, then he probably doesn't. PPR, I think he's probably fine because he's going to get a good bit of catches. I just don't think he's a smart start against the Bengals. However, I do think that the Cowboys can make this somewhat of a game based on last year against the Vikings. They didn't look bad. CeeDee looked good, and I think Zeke even looked good. But I'm sitting them against the Bengals. They have a pretty stout D-line that I don't want a part of.
Yeah, moving on to the wide receiver portion of the episode. My first starting receiver this week, DJ Moore at the Giants. DJ Moore he saw like I think 4 or 5 targets last week, but he didn't have much volume just because Baker Mayfield knows not to test Denzel Ward. I mean, Baker's been playing against him in practice since he was in the league. And, it kind of showed last week. Baker wasn't really looking his way. But the Giants' secondary is awful. Adoree Jackson definitely took a step back. Darnay Holmes was not that good. So, as long as Baker Mayfield gets him the ball, I think we'll be fine. Baker was really looking at his deep threats last week. That's why Robbie Anderson had such a good day. DJ Moore is still the receiver one in Carolina, though, and I think the Panthers have a bounce-back week as a whole team. I think they're going to come out and run the ball a lot more. I think they're going to take some deep shots, and I think Baker's going to look to try and get DJ Moore involved early, especially coming off the loss, and the Giants are going to be all hyped because they're coming off the win. But I think the Panthers come out, win this game in Panther fashion, and I think DJ Moore has a pretty good day and finally has a bounce-back week from the measly 6 points he put up last week.
My first starting receiver this week, Mike Williams against Kansas City. I'm back. We're back. I know he did shitty, and I don't blame you if you're scared to start him. Keenan Allen's out. If that man don't get a lot of targets, I literally don't know. The Chargers, they targeted everybody. Mike Williams was tied for the team lead in targets with 4. I don't even know how to describe that. But yeah. I think we're back. I'd be very surprised if you don't get to touchdown this week. I think he's back. I could be an asshole. I think Mike Williams is a buy low. That's just me. But that's what I'm rocking with.
I disagree. I think Mike Williams is on the same pace for a Mike Williams-esque year, just like I've been saying all offseason. So I'm just not a big Mike Williams guy, but if you're saying start him, I trust you. We are the greatest podcast on turf, so I trust you. My next stardom receiver, though, I know. You gotta trust me. Brandon Aiyuk.
Yeah, you trusted me on Mike Evans, so blow me away.
Mike Williams.
I always do that.
Listen, I'm only saying start Brandon Aiyuk this week because the 49ers are playing the Seattle Seahawks team. If the Seahawks defense comes out and tries to mimic what they did last week against the Broncos, they're going to try and key on Deebo Samuel, their true receiver one. They're going to use safety help over the top and just try and cover Deebo Samuel like a blanket, which is going to leave room, or which left room for Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy had a bunch of big plays. He had a lot of points. He was one of the breakout players of the week. So that's why I'm saying start Brandon Aiyuk. It is a divisional game, I know. But it is the 49ers home opener. They have something to prove, especially Trey Lance has something to prove, because some people are really buying into last week's loss, which I don't count at all. So I'm saying start Brandon Aiyuk this week. Even if Deebo doesn't get keyed as much, I still think Brandon Aiyuk has a good day. Just because, again, Trey Lance and the 49ers have something to prove now. They lost to the Bears, who on paper are a bottom team in the NFL. Going up against the Seahawks team, it's going to be riding their high horse. I think the Niners are going to come out here, punch them in the mouth, put up a lot of points, and do their thing. So that's why I'm saying start Brandon Aiyuk this week. And I could be wrong, just like Ryan could be on Mike Williams. But I'm taking the chance that I'm starting Brandon Aiyuk in the league. I have him in.
The next guy I'm going to mention, this is kind of a down bad guy. If you want running back heavy, you need a wide receiver too. How down bad are we talking? I'm not starting him in any of my leagues. but it's like a daily fantasy guy. Julio Jones.
I love it. That's not down bad. I love it.
It's a little bit down bad. He popped up on an injury report today, so I was about to take him off. Didn't practice with a knee injury. What's new? Julio Jones.
Nothing new.
But basically, why I say this is Lattimore is apparently Mike Evans' father. Granted,
Somehow.
It's
beyond me. I really don't know.
Chris Godwin's out. Who does Tom Brady have to throw the ball to?
Julio Jones.
Top
5 receiver all time, Julio
Russell
Jones.
Gage is also popped up on an injury report today with the ankle, I believe.
Sounds about right.
So if Julio's the number 2 and you need receiver help, why not? He looked pretty good last week.
Yeah, he did. Saw a lot of deep ball targets.
Yeah, and I mean, literally, why not?
Yeah.
If you went running back heavy, go ahead and rock with him.
I only have one sit-em wide receiver this week because I did have a sit-em tight end. But with my sit-em wide receiver, again, it goes without saying, CeeDee Lamb. It sucks because you probably drafted him middle, end of the second, early third round. But Dallas couldn't get anything going in the passing game at all. All defenses are going to have to do is key on CeeDee Lamb and dare Cooper Rush to throw the ball to Noah Brown or Simi Fehoko or Jalen Tolbert or Dalton Schultz even. But all these defenses are going to do is key on CeeDee Lamb, which is fine. It's not going to work. So you're going to sit CeeDee Lamb. It sucks. Honestly, if I'm you, if I'm a CeeDee Lamb fantasy football manager, which I'm not, thankfully, I'm trying to shop CeeDee Lamb for whatever I can at this point. Maybe like a guy who you think is going to be good who had a bad week 1, like a Mike Williams, as Ryan said earlier. We talked about it off camera. But yeah, you're going to sit CeeDee Lamb probably for the next few weeks unless somehow Cooper Rush comes out and looks good and CeeDee gets open. But he couldn't really get anything going last week. He was having trouble getting open. He was targeted a lot. But defenses are just going to key on CeeDee Lamb, throw a double team at him, work their defense around CeeDee Lamb and dare him to run the ball or dare them to throw the ball to one of their low-tier receivers. So until Dak Prescott gets back or until Dallas proves otherwise, you're going to be sitting CeeDee Lamb.
Believe it or not, I did a lot of thinking, and CeeDee Lamb might be a potential buy.
Really?
If the price is right. I think Michael Gallup, if he comes back, it'll help him. Cooper Rush and CeeDee Lamb looked okay last year in the one game that they played. I know it's a small sample size, but I mean, if the CeeDee Lamb owner's really pissed off, mad at the world, I mean, you could get him low and see what happens. As in terms of starting him this week, I mean, it depends on what you got, obviously, but he's definitely not on any daily fantasy lineup, so I could see why he would sit. My 2 sit-em wide receivers, Rashad Bateman and Christian Kirk. Now, these guys are guys that you can sit if you can. If you went running back heavy, then you probably can start him. But Rashad Bateman, I think he goes up against Xavier Howard and doesn't do that good against Miami. Miami has a pretty good defense, so I'm not really high on Rashad Bateman this week. And the next guy, Christian Kirk, I know he did really good last week. I get it. I do. And I could be an asshole, but it's Christian Kirk and he's a Jaguar. Going up against Kenny Moore and Gilmore, I don't like it.
I understand. I get
he's
it.
Christian Kirk and he's a Jaguar. I don't know why I have to keep saying it, but
you're still sleeping on the Jags, which is fine. My over's still going to cash, and you'll be handing me a crisp 20.
They're 0-1.
It's not like you said. It's not a big sample size.
It's going to be 0-2 unless they ain't beating the Colts.
And that's fine. All they got to do is win 7 games, and we're golden.
Okay. Go ahead and do your sit-em tight end.
My sit-em tight end this week is Kyle Pitts. One of the bright spots on the Rams defense was their linebacking core, specifically Bobby Wagner, and their limitation of tight ends. I mean, Dawson Knox really only had 1 or 2 targets.
Now, it's 7 yards.
Granted, he put up 1.5 fantasy points.
Catch and 5 yards. Huh?
That's literally all I did. And yeah, Kyle Pitts was really non-existent last week against the Saints, who also have a pretty good linebacking core with Demario Davis leading the pack. I think the Rams, again, come out pissed off, like Ryan said earlier. They're going to score a lot of points. I think Kyle Pitts is Marcus Mariota is not notorious for making his tight ends look good. I said it all offseason. I said I'm not drafting Kyle Pitts. And again, you probably didn't listen and you're stuck with Kyle Pitts, which is fine. But Kyle Pitts is going to be non-existent this week against the Rams defense that has always been pretty good against covering tight ends. They have Bobby Wagner, a guy who can cover a tight end pretty well. They have Jalen Ramsey, they're not afraid to put on a tight end. They have their safeties back who, they're not afraid to put on a tight end who are pretty good in coverage. So you're going to sit Kyle Pitts this week, and you're going to be thanking me on Sunday after the Rams game. Or after the Falcons game.
Start tight end. Anthony's boy, Gerald Everett. I think he could catch a touchdown this week. Who else? The guy from Denver could be all right.
Alberto.
Yeah, Alberto.
He was targeted a lot.
Sit tight ends. No, there's a shit ton. Literally, the whole entire league is full.
Hunter Henry.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
There's a ton of sit tight ends, but there's a couple starters if you need one.
Yeah, there's besides Kelsey.
Tyler Higbee is a decent
Yeah.
He had 11 targets. Not many tight ends get that. Granted, he sucked.
But he still had 11 targets.
11 targets.
So if you're a guy like my dad and you look at targets, there's something to look at.
Yeah. I mean, I look at targets, but
yeah,
11. That ain't bad.
Yeah. And that's going to wrap up this week's Week 2 Stardom Sit-em. Be sure to drop any comments you guys have below. Check out our TikToks. Leave some comments on our TikToks. Yeah, thank you guys for watching again. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and we'll see you guys next week.
See ya.
Peace.